Well, dam building 101. As far as we know, there is no little dam-shaped gene that goes around in beavers that says, here's how you build a dam. There's some mysterious way that those critters knew, without being told, after not doing it for 5 generations, this is how you build a dam. And there are many, many examples of that kind of thing in the animal world. But what we've been emphasizing here is because of the rapidity of the change, we can't wait for nonviolence to percolate up on evolutionary time. See, we're not on evolutionary time anymore because of peak oil and everything else. So we have to intervene much more consciously, much more deliberately. So Martin Luther King said we've got to put our attention on this. This is absolutely urgent. And that's why I emphasize with the Otpor uprising in Serbia, it's one of the few documented cases where we know how they learned it and we see how they're teaching it. They learned it with a piddling amount of money. I mean, piddling by their standards. By me, it has more money than I ever dreamed of in my whole life. But it's a very small amount of money by military standards, $20 million or so. These students were able to learn how to do a nonviolent overthrow from mostly translating Gene Sharp's books into English. I don't know if I mentioned this, but my book is being translated now in Bosnia, so of course I mentioned it. How would I not mention something like that? So we know how the information got to them, and we know that the same group, the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict, has taken those very people and their lessons that they learned and put this into a group called Canvas and exported it to Uzbekistan and all over Eastern Europe. For another example that we touched on last semester, we now know, although nobody knew it at the time, that the civil rights movement in America was strongly stimulated by the Indian freedom struggle, and not just notionally, but people came over here, people from here went there, people from there came here, and they said, here's how we do it, this is what you watch out for, this is what makes it work. There were far more people than anybody knew about that had actually done that. And similarly, the civil rights movement in turn now becomes a learning process and a throughput, and I think the reason that we have people sitting in trees in the Oak Grove today is partly because of that movement. It created a culture of resistance in America. We went from radical pacifism into civil rights into this culture of resistance that we now have, which has been mobilized against the WTO institutions and so forth. Now, having said all these wonderful things, you do have to be careful about the learning. Learning has to be smart and not just imitative. Some of you who were at the dinner party with me last night were teasing me because of my incessant reminiscences of the 60s, and I admit it is kind of silly, but there I am. So we had this wonderful movement in the 60s called the Free Speech Movement, the FSM, and it was glorious and went all over the country. But if you're actually here, you know that about 8 or 10 months after that, FSM2 happened. Now, FSM, same acronym but slightly different language. It stood for Filthy Speech Movement. And what it was people wanted to get up and use 4-letter words on Sproul Plaza, and they wanted the administration to give them microphones to do this with. And if they wouldn't do it, then they were abridging our freedom of speech and the Constitution. In other words, they imitated the mechanism, but for a cause which was trivial at best, and actually kind of obnoxious at worst, if you happen not to like that kind of vocabulary. So you have this. It's not just the case that something happens and it gets noticed that it automatically will be learned. What we're also trying to acquire is the ability to see under the surface to the basic principles, relocate those basic principles in our setting, and apply them in an appropriate way. Okay, so that is the name of the game. And I freely admit that there's some mysterious processes going on here, and it's like the punctuated equilibrium that they talk about in evolution, where suddenly all over the planet species decide, okay, now let's try fur. So we've done feathers, we've done scales, let's go for fur. PETA isn't around to stop us. So all the different continents, creatures are not in contact with one another. You can't account for it in the ordinary way by mechanistic means, but these things spring up. So there is all of that, but we have to use our cognitive faculties in a very sophisticated way. So as this learning picks up and you have more events taking place that are of a nonviolent nature, you're having more organizations coming into existence to foster those events and perpetuate them. And some of those organizations, but not enough, this in my opinion, it's starting to improve now, but not nearly enough, are working on the theory itself and working on the interpretation, which means getting the general public to understand what just happened. If you remember from the very beginning of that Otpor movie, Bringing Down a Dictator, the first thing that Martin Sheen said was there was a war that took place, and I bet you never heard of it. I know that I didn't. Here's this incredible, successful overthrow, and nobody ever heard of it. So we're starting to strengthen that part. And as this is all slowly accumulating and growing, I'm reminded of something that I read recently, that the Wright brothers in Kitty Hawk, New Jersey, got into this contraption and fired it up and flew this airplane for a few hundred yards. That was the beginning of aviation. People were standing around saying this is impossible, it can't work, human beings are not supposed to fly. 65 years later, we put a man on the moon. So that's why I say we're not in evolutionary time anymore. Things have accelerated very, very rapidly. And I would say that we're not at Kitty Hawk with nonviolence, but I think we're at the Red Baron stage. The early years of World War I biplanes are saying, but it's not nearly as developed as it should be. Still pretty romantic, I'd say. And what we're seeing, I think, is roughly speaking, there are two schools of thought in the world of nonviolence awareness. And in actual fact, there's probably a lot of people who haven't thought this through, so they don't know which school they would come out on. But those who have thought it through seem to be in roughly two camps. There's one which I call the aspirin school. And they're saying, hey, this stuff works, so why don't we use it? And then there's what I call the overview school, which is saying, I want you to notice the subtle distinction between hey and people are saying, what is going on here? This stuff seems to work, and that says something about human nature, which we didn't know before. So let's figure it out. And then the aspirin types, and of course the language that's usually used for that is strategic nonviolence. And as we've said more than once, it tends to be a negative approach, take away the violence, and what you're left with is strategic nonviolence. Whereas the overview people tend to be looking for a positive definition of what is it that's going on here. Similarly, the aspirin folks tend to say we can use it for this application without thinking about its applications to everything. Whereas the overview people say, hey, this could be, as I'm saying, this could be the core of the whole new paradigm. Everything would be different if we would understand what this thing is, start putting it into practice. Okay. Principle. Yeah, principle, thanks. Yeah. So there's a rough consensus emerging among the latter group, the principle group, which is saying that this is huge. This is part of a paradigm shift. It's not just behavioral. It's not something that you learn to do and then you go back to the same old, same old. They are saying that life is way more interconnected than it appears. And they're saying at the very least. I mean, some people are saying that life is a quantum reality. It's absolutely a unity, and all difference is a question of appearance. Does not say it doesn't exist at all. For some cases, appearances matter a lot. It matters what you do and so forth. Whether you do cut down a tree or don't cut down a tree matters on our level. But there's a deeper level where everything is one in some way that our conscious minds cannot grasp. So since our conscious minds cannot grasp it, it will not be on the final. I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time with it. And I think we can work with the proposition that life is much more interconnected than we thought. And it becomes much more easy to see that as soon as you start looking at the world beyond the material level. Because on the material level, it is not interconnected very much. I mean, the molecules bump into each other. They don't even apologize. They just go their way. And getting above that material level then, as I see it, now this is, I'm going to try a new idea out on you, and I hope you like it, because if you do, then I can use it in San Diego this evening. And if you don't, then I've got to go back to the drawing boards. I think that science is really starting to come on board. It's starting to be very useful, and we can see this on now 3 levels. This is going to be a little bit beyond the presentation that I made at the beginning of PAX 164A. Okay, on the material level, the culmination of the human attempt to predict how we can account for human experience on the basis of the motion of material particles, that project came to an end with the discovery that you can't. Because in fact, guess what? There are no material particles. There are intersecting probability waves of force fields, or God knows what those things really are. But one thing they certainly are not are standard Newtonian billiard balls. Okay? Now, the fact that the project came to an end and it came up with a negative answer doesn't mean that people immediately recognized the significance of this. A lot of people just go on practicing science as though that had never happened. I was deeply involved in a conversation with nuclear weapons lab scientists some years ago, and I said, well, what about quantum theory? And one of them said, well, you know, if I were driving a quantum, I would need a quantum mechanic to fix it, wouldn't I? And that was about as far as they were willing to go, folks, in the discussion of the implications of quantum theory. So this is, you know, what am I trying to say here? I'm just trying to emphasize that you can go on practicing science as though Newton was right and there's little black holes with yellow ball. But on the level of people who think the implications of this discovery are absolutely world-shattering. And so then we tried it again with biological sciences. Let's see how we can generate a human being with everything that entails from a fixed set of genes. And in order to do this, they calculated that they would need, I don't know, 340,000 genes or something like that. Somebody here from MCB can correct me on the numbers. But when the Genome Project was over, it took much less time, a lot more money. The Genome Project was over, they came up with an astounding discovery, which they were all ignoring for the most part, that you cannot build a human being on the basis of genes. Because for one thing, there's only 80,000 genes instead of 340,000. There's not enough information, no matter how you cut it. Even if you go down to the molecular level, you cannot get enough information into those 80,000 packets. So we were barking up the wrong tree. Well, now most biologists will say, oh, let's keep barking. They're paying us, we bark. No problem. But some are saying, whoa, you know, then what does create a human being? And so here we get to the third experiment, which is going on now. And I'm going to call this cognitive science, but I don't necessarily mean the Cog-Sci department at Berkeley. It's a little bit broader than that. But all of these experiments that I started sharing with you last semester about human determinism and how human beings are affected by their own decisions and how those around them are affected by those decisions. And here we really are at the beginning of what looks like an extremely exciting breakthrough. It would look pretty good. About 20 years ago, they were calling it psychoneuroimmunology, but it now looks with these new magnetic resonance techniques where they're able to map the brain dynamically, so they can tell what part of your brain lights up when you have which particular thought. It's becoming the field is really opening up, and I think people are going to be, at least people who are comfortable with this kind of thing at all, are going to have a vocabulary for explaining that, in the words of a famous bumper sticker, which I photographed in Tamales, California, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. It's, by all accounts, my favorite bumper sticker. I'm not saying a lot, because I like a lot of bumper stickers. So in the context of this breakthrough, I'm going to now lay out just a few simple points, what I think are the basics that nonviolent theory is groping its way towards, and this will be partly familiar to it, but partly not. The proposition is that, now I'm thinking now of a situation of conflict or at least disagreement, okay? So that could rise from disagreement to dispute to conflict. In every human being, there is a core of awareness of that interconnectedness that we were just talking about. The person may be acting as if they had no such awareness, but no matter who they are, that awareness is there. Okay? So strategic nonviolence, this is not critical. But for the cutting edge principle nonviolence really going to become part of the Great Turning, I think this is absolutely critical. So no matter how conditioned the person is, no matter how blockaded they are against their own inner feelings, that awareness is there. So all division then, all not just disagreement, but division, is based on an occlusion of this awareness, right? I have somehow lost awareness of my connection with Samantha. So then I can come to the view that in some little way, or some big way, my happiness could be furthered by making her unhappy. Don't worry, Samantha, that is not going to happen. I'm just taking you as an example. But that's how all violence unrolls, from that big mistake where the person cannot contact their awareness of that interconnectedness. So enter the nonviolent actor or actress. And that person, in some very pertinent way, reawakens or deepens his or her awareness of that interconnectedness. And finally, this new awareness awakens the other person. That is basically a psychological roadmap of how nonviolence works. Now, mind you, on the big group level, there's strategic nonviolence. You can corral people into doing things that they don't want. We've discussed many cases of this. How we got Pinochet out of power, we got Milosevic out of power, how the Iraqis got the British and their own sheikh out of power in 1948. You can force them out even if they don't want to go. You can do that. But to make a permanent change, you're going to want to do it in a different way. And what you're doing is you're expanding your own awareness. Usually, it's not a very easy, not a very comfortable process. You go through some struggle to do this. It's suffering in a way. And in doing that, that communicates to the other person and awakens them in a way which we have up to now not been able to document or explain scientifically. So let me close and bring it right on to 10:30 just by reading you a quote which I often have handed out on midterms as part of an analysis passage, but I don't have to do that now because I found some fantastic quotes for your final. I can't wait for the final exam. I'm really eager to give them to you. But I won't use this one. It's by Marshall Frady, who wrote a series of articles on Jesse Jackson. And in the course of that, he touched on Martin Luther King. And he said, King started from the essentially religious persuasion that in every human being, black or white, deputy sheriff, manual laborer, or governor, there exists, however tenuously, a certain natural identification with every other human being. This is exactly what I was just talking about. He's talking a certain natural identification. That, in the overarching design of the universe which ultimately connects us all together, we tend to feel that what happens to our fellow human beings in some way also happens to us. You know, it can be closer or further away. What happened in Virginia affects us very deeply because it was, in a way, it's our demographic. And so it also happens to us. You know, people don't write sentences like this anymore. That's why I like Frady so much. This is all one sentence. So that no man can continue to debase or abuse another human being without eventually feeling in himself at least some dull answering hurt and stir of shame. Therefore, in the catharsis of a live confrontation with wrong, which is called what in our vocabulary? Nonviolent moment. Thank you. Name of a famous DVD. Therefore, in the catharsis of a live confrontation with wrong, when an oppressor's violence is met with a forgiving love, all oppressors are male in this paragraph, he can be vitally touched and even at least momentarily reborn as a human being. This is wonderful language. While the society witnessing such a confrontation will be quickened in conscience toward compassion and justice. Okay. Maybe I will course web you this quote because it's so good. Yeah. This is Marshall Frady. Is it right? Okay, Michael?
I'm ready for the nonviolent revolution of the world. I have anything that like to start on campus. I went to the VP forum yesterday, and it's pretty crazy what VP is trying to do here. And the deal goes through in June, so if like something doesn't happen this semester, like just goes through. And like save the a lot, like definitely take the time to like learn more. Like I don't know what I have to like say which way to go.
Okay. Okay, this is one way or another. Come on up, Paul. This gets right to our very life. And I'd like to introduce now a new friend of mine, Paul Chappell, who has a military background, has actually been on tour of active duty in Iraq. And when I asked him if he was going back, he said that's up to the American people. So he's going to talk to us about what happens with narrow nationalisms and also how we can talk to conservatives. Take a conservative to lunch this week. So Paul, would you come over here?
Oh, this is fine. My name is Paul Chappell. I'm actually active duty in the Army, and I have a particular fondness for what I call peaceful democratic solutions, because that's what's allowed all of us to be here today and have this discussion. If you lived this country 200 years ago, when if you weren't a white male landowner, you had no rights, it really wasn't a good country to live in. But the fact that we're here now, men, women, people from different religious backgrounds, people from different ethnicities, it shows how far we've come. And that didn't happen through war. It happened through peaceful democratic solutions, and it brought us to where we are today. I'm a West Point graduate. I was actually a White House intern under the Bush administration, and I wrote a book. It'll be published early 2008 called Peaceful Revolution. And I have a long history of reading Thoreau, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, all the major religious texts, Western philosophy. And you understand that nonviolence, or what I call peaceful democratic solutions, are very, very old. And they're very, very cherished in many cultures and many countries all over the world. But right now our country is in a very turbulent time because people are divided. And we're divided along political ideology, we're divided along what issues. And unless we can come together across political boundaries, how can we ever have peaceful solutions? And I'd like to talk about how we can open up dialogue with people in the middle, people on the right, even people on the far right. I think it's a very realistic solution, and I think we can all do it together. So whenever you talk about the government or try to critique the government, people say, oh, well, you're un-American or you're unpatriotic. And so what I always tell people is, let's say you have a child. If you love your child, and you find out your child is murdering people or doing drugs or doing anything immoral or dishonest, you try to correct your child. If you don't love your child, you let your child get away with murder because you're just blindly apathetic. In the same way, if you love your country, then you want to make your country a better place to live. If you love your country, you want to make America a better place, as people did for the past 200 years, which is what is allowing us to have this discussion today. So if Martin Luther King would have just said, well, I don't want to be unpatriotic, I don't want to question the government, or if Susan B. Anthony would have said, yeah, I don't want to be an American, I should just let things go, where would we be today? Nowhere near where we are right now. And so 200 years ago, if you were a white male landowner, you had it pretty good. If you weren't, if you're Native American, Chinese, black, Hispanic, female, homosexual, handicapped, even Catholic or Jewish in many cases, it was a very difficult country to live in. We've come a long way through those democratic means that has made our country great and which our democracy is founded upon. And so, when my father was drafted into the Army in the early 50s, he was half white, half black, my mother's Korean. The Army was segregated. So governments make mistakes. Governments aren't perfect. They're elected, and they're run by people. And so another thing we need to discuss with people is you need to differentiate between your government and your country. Your government is 300 million American people, the Constitution, and the ideals of democracy. Your government's an elected few representatives who make mistakes like everybody. So if you want to be loyal to your country, you need to question and improve your government. That's what Martin Luther King did. That's what Susan B. Anthony, Mark Twain, Henry David Thoreau, Woody Guthrie, Helen Keller, all these people did this. And now if you do that, oh, you're un-American, you're unpatriotic, all nonsense. As Henry David Thoreau once said, I'm not a no government. I'm not asking for no government, but it wants a better government. And that's what we all need to ask for. Now, when I was growing up in elementary school, we have government classes and we're always talking about the checks and balances between legislative, executive, judicial branches. But what they don't teach you in elementary school, what they should teach every kindergartner in every grade, first grade through 12th grade, is that the most important check and balance of the government is the American people. The American people are the most important check and balance. Judicial, executive, legislative branches are typically reactionary. They respond to social and people's movements. And our democracy is founded upon Congress being subservient to the American people.